Good morning and welcome back. I guess it's afternoon by the time you see this. I find it's easier to record this in the morning when everything is quiet here at the senior center. Although I thought about taking the book home and reading to you from a very comfy place because I hope that you're sitting comfortably somewhere listening and taking it all in and thinking about the lessons that can be learned here. So we're continuing our read with Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. You can tell, this book has been battered and worn, and it's probably my 10th copy of it. It's a book that it truly is one of my favorites. I have handed it out so many times to friends at a time in their lives that I thought they really needed to experience it. And that's what I hope I'm sharing with you here. So if you recall, we ended last week with Morrie having his living funeral, and his cousin had written a beautiful poem about him, and it was a wonderful time for him. It was something that he wanted to hear, those kind things that people thought about him. And I challenged you with maybe writing down things of fond memories, things that you want your loved ones to know, or even reaching out to them in one way or another. And I also shared with you the project that I did with my students, and I'm sure I'm going to refer to them a lot. They have giant pieces of my heart, and my interaction with them was 17 years ago, and I'm still friends with several of them. I believe this book connected us in a way and made us look at life in a way that we needed, and that without it we wouldn't have seen. So let's jump in. The next chapter is called The Student. At this point, I should explain what had happened to me since that summer day when I had last hugged my dear and wise professor and my promise to keep in touch. I did not keep in touch. How many of us do that? Like, if you move and you just love your neighbor so much, and you say, oh, I'm going to be half a mile away. We're going to be fine. And then you find that because you don't actually see each other every day, that level of connection it gets less and less. And you have to really make a really concerted effort in order to keep that level of connection and relationship up. In fact, I lost contact with most of the people I knew in college, including my beer-drinking friends and the first woman I ever woke up with in the morning. The years after graduation hardened me into someone quite different from the strutting graduate who left campus that day, headed for New York City, ready to offer the world his talent. The world I discovered was not at all that interested. I wandered around my early 20s, paying rent and reading classifieds and wondering why the lights were not turning green for me. My dream was to be a famous musician. I played the piano. But after several years of dark, empty nightclubs, broken promises, bands that kept breaking up, and producers who seemed excited about everyone but me, the dream soured. I was failing for the first time in my life. At the same time, I had my first serious encounter with death. My favorite uncle, my mother's brother, the man who had taught me music, taught me to drive, teased me about girls, thrown me a football, the one adult whom I targeted as a child and said, "That's who I want to be when I grow up." He died of pancreatic cancer at the age of 44. He was a short, handsome man with a thick mustache, and I was with him for the last year of his life, living in an apartment just below his. I watched his strong body wither, then bloat, saw him suffer night after night, doubled over at the dinner table, pressing on his stomach, his eyes shut, his mouth contorted in pain. "Oh, God," he would moan. "Oh, Jesus." The rest of us, my aunt, his 2 sons, me, stood there silently, cleaning the plates, averting our eyes. It was the most helpless I have ever felt in my life. One night in May, my uncle and I sat on the balcony of his apartment. It was breezy and warm. He looked out toward the horizon and said through gritted teeth that he wouldn't be around to see his kids into the next school year. He asked if I would look after them. I told him not to talk that way, and he stared at me sadly. He died a few weeks later. After the funeral, my life changed. I felt as if time were suddenly precious, water going down an open drain, and I could not move quickly enough. No more playing music at half-empty nightclubs, no more writing songs in my apartment, songs that no one would hear. I turned to school. I earned a master's degree in journalism and took the first job offered as a sports writer. Instead of chasing my own fame, I wrote about famous athletes chasing theirs. I worked for newspapers and freelanced for magazines. I worked at a pace that knew no hours, no limits. I would wake up in the morning, brush my teeth, and sit down at the typewriter in the same clothes I had slept in. My uncle had worked for a corporation and hated it. Same thing every day. And I was determined never to end up like him. I bounced from New York to Florida and eventually took a job in Detroit as a columnist for the Detroit Free Press. The sports appetite in that city was insatiable. They had professional teams in football, basketball, baseball, and hockey, and it matched my ambition. In a few years, I was not only penning columns, I was writing sports books, doing radio shows, and appearing regularly on TV, spouting my opinions on rich football players and hypocritical college sports programs. I was part of the media thunderstorm that now soaks our country. I was in demand. I stopped renting. I started buying. I bought a house on a hill. I bought cars. I invested in stocks and built a portfolio. I was cranked to a 5th gear, and everything I did on a deadline. I exercised like a demon. I drove my car at breakneck speed. I made more money than I had ever figured to see. I met a dark-haired woman named Gena who somehow loved me despite my schedule and the constant absences. We married after a 7-year courtship. I was back to work a week after the wedding. I told her and myself that we would one day start a family, something she wanted very much, but that day never came. Instead, I buried myself in accomplishments because with accomplishments, I believed I could control things. I could squeeze in every last piece of happiness before I got sick and died, like my uncle before me, which I figured was my natural fate. As for Morrie, well, I thought about him now and then, the things he had taught me about being human and relating to others, but it was always in the distance, as if from another life. Over the years, I threw away any mail that came from Brandeis University, figuring they were only asking for money, so I did not know of Morrie's illness. The people who might have told me were long forgotten, their phone numbers buried in some packed-away box in the attic. It might have stayed that way had I not been flicking through the TV channels late one night when something caught my ear. In March of 1995, a limousine carrying Ted Koppel, the host of ABC TV's Nightline, pulled up to the snow-covered curb outside Morrie's house in West Newton, Massachusetts. Morrie was in a wheelchair full-time now, getting used to helpers lifting him like a heavy sack from the chair to the bed and to the bed to the chair. He had begun to cough while eating, and chewing was a chore. His legs were dead. He would never walk again. Yet he refused to be depressed. Instead, Morrie had become a lightning rod of ideas. He jotted down his thoughts on yellow pads, envelopes, folders, scrap paper. He wrote bite-sized philosophies about living with death's shadow. Accept what you are able to do and what you are not able to do. Accept the past as past without denying it or discarding it. Learn to forgive yourself and to forgive others. Don't assume that it's too late to get involved. After a while, he had more than 50 of these aphorisms, which he shared with his friends. One friend, a fellow Brandeis professor named Morrie Stein, was so taken with the words that he sent them to a Boston Globe reporter, who came out and wrote a long feature story on Morrie. The headline read, "A Professor's Final Course, His Own Death." The article caught the eye of a producer from the Nightline show, who brought it to Koppel in Washington, D.C. "Take a look at this," the professor said. Next thing you knew, there were cameramen in Morrie's living room, and Koppel's limousine was in the front of the house. Several of Morrie's friends and family members had gathered to meet Koppel, and when the famous man entered the house, they buzzed with excitement, all except Morrie, who wheeled himself forward, raised his eyebrows, and interrupted the clamor with his high sing-song voice. "Ted, I need to check you out before I agree to do this interview." There was an awkward moment of silence. Then the two men were ushered into the study, and the door was shut. "Man," one friend whispered outside the door, "I hope Ted goes easy on Morrie." "I hope Morrie goes easy on Ted," said the other. Inside the office, Morrie motioned for Koppel to sit down. He crossed his hands in his lap and smiled. "Tell me something close to your heart," Morrie began. "My heart?" Koppel studied the old man. "All right," he said cautiously, and he spoke about his children. They were close to his heart, weren't they? "Good," Morrie said. "Now tell me something about your faith." Koppel was uncomfortable. "Well, I usually don't talk about such things with people I've only known for a few minutes." "Ted, I'm dying," Morrie said, peering over his glasses. "I don't have a lot of time here." Koppel laughed. "All right, faith." He quoted a passage from Marcus Aurelius, something he felt strongly about. I think it's really Marcus Aurelius. Sorry. Something he felt strongly about. Morrie nodded. "Now let me ask you something," Koppel said. "Have you ever seen my program?" Morrie shrugged. "Twice, I think." "Twice? That's all?" "Don't feel bad. I've only seen Oprah once." "Well, the 2 times you saw my show, what did you think?" Morrie paused. "To be honest?" "Well, yes." "I thought you were a narcissist." Koppel burst into laughter. "I'm too ugly to be a narcissist," he said. Soon the cameras were rolling in front of the living room fireplace, with Koppel in his crisp blue shirt and Morrie in his shaggy gray sweater. He had refused fancy clothes or makeup for this interview. His philosophy was that death should not be embarrassing. He was not about to powder its nose. Because Morrie sat in his wheelchair, the camera never caught his withered legs. And because he was still able to move his hands, Morrie always spoke with both hands waving. He showed great passion when explaining how you face the end of life. "Ted," he said, "when all this started, I asked myself, am I going to withdraw from this world? Like most people do, or am I going to live? I decided I'm going to live, or at least try to live, the way I want, with dignity, with courage, with humor, with composure. There's some mornings when I cry and mourn for myself. Some mornings I'm so angry and bitter, but it doesn't last too long. Then I get up and I say, I want to live." So far, I've been able to do it. Will I be able to continue? I don't know, but I'm betting on myself that I will. Koppel seemed extremely taken with Morrie. He asked about the humility that death induced. "Well, Fred," Morrie said accidentally, then he quickly corrected himself. "I mean Ted." "Now that's inducing humility," Koppel said, laughing. The two men spoke about the afterlife. They spoke about Morrie's increasing dependency on other people. He already needed help eating and sitting and moving from place to place. What Koppel asked, did Morrie dread the most about his slow, insidious decay? Morrie paused. He asked if he could say this certain thing on television, and Koppel said, "Go ahead." Morrie looked straight into the eyes of the most famous interviewer in America. "Well, Ted, one day soon someone's going to have to wipe my ass." The program aired on a Friday night. It began with Ted Koppel from behind the desk in Washington, his voice booming with authority. "Who is Morrie Schwartz?" he said. "And why, by the end of the night, are so many of you going to care about him?" 1,000 miles away, in my house on the hill, I was casually flipping channels and I heard these words from the TV set. "Who is Morrie Schwartz?" And I went numb. Let me make sure I'm not skipping anything. It's our first class together in the spring of 1976. I enter Morrie's large office and notice the seemingly countless books that line the wall, shelf after shelf. Books on sociology, philosophy, religion, psychology. There's a large rug on the hardwood floor and a window that looks out on the campus walk. Only a dozen or so students are there, fumbling with notebooks and syllabi. Most of them wear jeans and earth shoes and plaid flannel shirts. I tell myself it will not be easy to cut a class this small. Maybe I shouldn't take it. "Mitchell?" Morrie says, reading from the attendance list. I raise a hand. "Do you prefer Mitch, or is Mitchell better?" I've never been asked this by a teacher. I do a double take at this guy in his yellow turtleneck and green corduroy pants, the silver hair that falls on his forehead. He's smiling. "Mitch," I say. Mitch is what my friends call me. "Well, Mitch it is then," Morrie says, as if closing a deal. "And Mitch?" "Yes, I hope that one day you'll think of me as your friend." The orientation. As I turned the rental car onto Morrie Street in West Newton, a quiet suburb of Boston, I had a cup of coffee in one hand and a cellular phone between my ear and shoulder. I was talking to a TV producer about a piece we were doing. My eyes jumped from the digital clock — my return flight was in a few hours — to the mailbox numbers on the tree-lined suburban street. The car radio was on, the all-news station. This was how I operated. 5 things at once. "Roll back the tape," I said to the producer. "Let me hear that part again." "Okay," he said. "It's going to take a second." Suddenly I was upon the house. I pushed the brakes, spilling my coffee in my lap. As the car stopped, I caught a glimpse of a large Japanese maple tree and 3 figures sitting near it in the driveway, a young man and a middle-aged woman flanking a small old man in a wheelchair. Morrie. At the sight of my old professor, I froze. "Hello?" the producer said in my ear. "Did I lose you?" I had not seen him in 16 years. His hair was thinner, nearly white, and his face was gaunt. I suddenly felt unprepared for this reunion. For one thing, I was stuck on the phone, and I had hoped that he hadn't noticed my arrival so that I could drive back around the block a few more times, finish my business, get mentally ready. But Morrie, this new, withered version of a man I had once known so well, was smiling at the car, hands folded in his lap, waiting for me to emerge. "Hey," the producer said again, "are you there?" For all the time we'd spent together, for all the kindness and patience Morrie had shown me when I was young, I should have dropped the phone and jumped from the car, run and held him and kissed him hello. Instead, I killed the engine and sunk down off the seat as if I were looking for something. Yeah, I'm here," I whispered, and continued my conversation with the TV producer until we were finished. I did what I had become best at doing. I tended to my work, even when my dying professor waited on his front lawn. I'm not proud of this, but this is what I did. Now, 5 minutes later, Morrie was hugging me, his thinning hair rubbing against my cheek. I told him I was searching for my keys. That's what had taken me so long in the car, and I squeezed him tighter as if I could crush my little lie. Although the spring sunshine was warm, he wore a windbreaker and his legs were covered by a blanket. He smelled faintly sour, the way people on medication sometimes do. With his face pressed close to mine, I could hear his labored breathing in my ear. "My old friend," he whispered. "You've come back at last." He rocked against me, not letting go, his hands reaching up from my elbows as I bent over him. I was surprised at such affection after all these years, but then, in the stone walls I had built between my present and my past, I had forgotten how close we once were. I remembered graduation day, the briefcase, his tears at my departure, and I swallowed because I knew deep down that I was no longer the good, gift-bearing student he remembered. I only hoped that for the next few hours I could fool him. Inside the house, we sat at a walnut dining room table near a window that looked out on the neighbor's house. Morrie fussed with his wheelchair, trying to get comfortable, As was his custom, he wanted to feed me, and I said all right. One of the helpers, a stout Italian woman named Connie, cut up bread and tomatoes and brought containers of chicken salad, hummus, and tabbouleh. She also brought some pills. Morrie looked at them and sighed. His eyes were more sunken than I remembered them, and his cheekbones were pronounced. This gave him a harsher, older look, until he smiled, of course, and the sagging cheeks gathered up like curtains. "Mitch," he said softly, "you know that I'm dying." I knew. "All right, then." Morrie swallowed the pills, put down the paper cup, inhaled deeply, and let it out. "Shall I tell you what it's like?" "Yes." I said, "What it's like? To die?" "Yes," he said. Although I was unaware of it, our last class had just begun. It was my freshman year. Morrie's older than most of the teachers, and I'm younger than most of the students, having left high school a year early. To compensate for my youth on campus, I wear old gray sweatshirts and box in a local gym and walk around with an unlit cigarette in my mouth, even though I do not smoke. I drive a beat-up Mercury Cougar with the windows down and the music up. I seek my identity in toughness, but it is Morrie's softness that draws me, and because he does not look at me as a kid trying to be something more than I am, I relax. I finish that first course with him and enroll for another. He's an easy marker. He does not much care for grades. One year, they say during the Vietnam War, Morrie gave all his male students A's to help keep their student deferments. I began to call Morrie Coach, the way I used to address my high school track coach. Morrie likes the nickname. "Coach," he says, "all right, I'll be your coach, and you can be my player. You can play all the lovely parts of life that I'm too old for now." Sometimes we eat together in the cafeteria. Morrie, to my delight, is even more of a slob than I am. He talks instead of chewing, laughs with his mouth open, delivers a passionate a thought through a mouthful of egg salad, the little yellow pieces spewing from his teeth. It cracks me up. The whole time I know him, I have two overwhelming desires: to hug him and to give him a napkin. The classroom. The sun beamed in through the dining room window, lighting up the hardwood floor. We'd been talking there for nearly 2 hours. The phone rang yet again, and Morrie asked his helper Connie to get it. She'd been jotting the callers' names in Morrie's small black appointment book. Friends, meditation teachers, a discussion group, someone who wanted to photograph him for a magazine. It was clear I was not the only one interested in visiting my old professor. The Nightline appearance had made him something of a celebrity. But I was impressed with, perhaps even a bit envious of, all the friends that Morrie seemed to have. I thought about the buddies that circled my orbit back in college. Where had they gone? "You know, Mitch, now that I'm dying, I've become much more interested in people." "You are always interesting." "No," Morrie smiled, "you're kind." "No, I'm not," I thought. "Here's the thing," he said. "People see me as a bridge. I'm not as alive as I used to be, but I'm not yet dead. I'm sort of in between." He coughed, then regained his smile. "I'm on the last great journey here, and people want me to tell them what to pack." The phone rang again. "Morrie, can you talk?" Connie asked. "I'm visiting with my old pal now," he announced. "Let them call back." I cannot tell you why he received me so warmly. I was hardly the promising student who had left him 16 years earlier. Had it not been for Nightline, Morrie might have died without ever seeing me again. I had no good excuse for this except the one that everyone these days seems to have. I had become too wrapped up in the siren song of my own life. I was busy. What happened to me? I asked myself. Morrie's high, smoky voice took me back to my university years, when I thought rich people were evil, a shirt and a tie were prison clothes, and life without freedom to get up and go, motorcycle beneath you, breeze in your face, down the streets of Paris, into the mountains of Tibet, was not a good life at all. What happened to me? The 80s happened. The 90s happened. Death and sickness and getting fat and going bald happened. I traded lots of dreams for a bigger paycheck, and I never even realized I was doing it. Yet here was Morrie talking with the wonder of our college years as if I'd simply been on a long vacation. Have you found someone to share your heart with, he asked. Are you giving to your community? Are you at peace with yourself? Are you trying to be as human as you can be? I squirmed, wanting to show I had been grappling deeply with such questions. What happened to me? I once promised myself I would never work for money, that I would join the Peace Corps, that I would live in beautiful, inspirational places. Instead, I'd been in Detroit for 10 years now at the same workplace, using the same bank, visiting the same barber. I was 37, more efficient than in college, tied to computers and modems and cell phones. I wrote articles about rich athletes who, for the most part, could not care less about people like me. I was no longer young for my peer group, nor did I walk around in gray sweatshirts with unlit cigarettes in my mouth. I did not have long discussions over egg salad sandwiches about the meaning of life. My days were full, yet I remained much of the time unsatisfied. What happened to me? Coach, I said suddenly, remembering the nickname. Morrie beamed. That's me. I'm still your coach. He laughed and resumed his eating, a meal he had started 40 minutes earlier. I watched him now, his hands working gingerly, as if he were learning to use them for the very first time. He could not press down hard with a knife. His fingers shook. Each bite was a struggle. He chewed the food finely before swallowing, and sometimes it slid out of the sides of his lips, so that he had to put down what he was holding to dab his face with a napkin. The skin from his wrist to his knuckles was dotted with age spots, and it was loose like skin hanging from a chicken soup bone. For a while we just ate like that, a sick old man, a healthy younger man, both absorbing the quiet of the room. I would say it was an embarrassed silence, but I seemed to be the only one embarrassed. Dying, Morrie suddenly said, is only one thing to be sad over, Mitch. Living unhappily is something else. So many of the people who come to visit me are unhappy. Why? Well, for one thing, the culture we have does not make people feel good about themselves. We're teaching the wrong things, and you have to be strong enough to say, if the culture doesn't work, don't buy it. Create your own. Most people can't do it. They're more unhappy than me, even in my current condition. I may be dying, but I am surrounded by loving, caring souls. How many people can say that? I was astonished by his complete lack of self-pity. Morrie, who could no longer dance, swim, bathe, or walk. Morrie, who could no longer answer his own door, dry himself after a shower, or even roll over in bed. How could he be so accepting? I watched him struggle with his fork, picking at a piece of tomato, missing it the first 2 times. A pathetic scene, and yet I could not deny that sitting in his presence was almost magically serene, the same calm breeze that soothed me back in college. I shot a glance at my watch, force of habit. It was getting late, and I thought about changing my plane reservation home. Then Morrie did something that haunts me to this day. You know how I'm going to die? He said. I raised my eyebrows. I'm going to suffocate. Yep. My lungs, because of my asthma, can't handle the disease. It's moving up my body, this ALS. It's already got my legs. Pretty soon it'll get my arms and hands. And when it hits my lungs, he shrugged his shoulders. I'm sunk. I had no idea what to say, so I said, well, you never know. Morrie closed his eyes. I know, Mitch. You mustn't be afraid of dying. I've had a good life, and we all know it's going to happen. I maybe have 4 or 5 months. Come on, I said nervously. Nobody can say. I can, he said softly. There's even a little test a doctor showed me. A test? Inhale a few times. I did as he said. Now once more, but this time when you exhale, count as many numbers as you can before you take another breath. I quickly exhaled the numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I reached 70 before my breath was gone. Good, Morrie said. You have healthy lungs. Now watch what I do. He inhaled, then began his number count in a soft, wobbly voice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. He stopped, gasping for air. When the doctor first asked me to do this, I could reach 23. Now it's 18. He closed his eyes, shook his head. My tank is almost empty. I tapped my thighs nervously. That was enough for one afternoon. Come back and see your old professor, Morrie said, and when I hugged him goodbye, I promised I would. I tried not to think about the last time I promised this. In the campus bookstore, I shopped for the items on Morrie's reading list. I purchased books that I never knew existed, titles such as Youth, Identity and Crisis, I and Thou, The Divided Self. Before college, I did not know the study of human relations could be considered scholarly until I met Morrie. I did not believe it. But his passion for books is real and contagious. We begin to talk seriously sometimes after class when the room is emptied. He asks me questions about my life, then quotes lines from Erich Fromm, Martin Buber, Erik Erikson. Often he defers to their words, footnoting his own advice, even though he obviously thought the same things himself. It is at these times that I realize he is indeed a professor, not an uncle. One afternoon, I am complaining about the confusion of my age, what is expected of me versus what I want for myself. Have I told you about the tension of opposites, he says? The tension of opposites? Life is a series of pulls back and forth. You want to do one thing, but you're bound to do something else. Something hurts you, yet you know it shouldn't. You take certain things for granted, even when you know you should never take anything for granted. A tension of opposites, like a pull on a rubber band, and most of us live somewhere in the middle. Sounds like a wrestling match, I say. A wrestling match, he laughs. Yeah, you could describe life that way. So which side wins, I ask. Which side wins? He smiles at me, the crinkled eyes, the crooked teeth. Love wins. Love always wins. So we're going to end there today, and I want you to really think about those final words that Morrie spoke to Mitch while in school, the memory he was having about life being a wrestling match, or what he calls a tension of opposites, that we live somewhere in the middle of that rubber band. Which side will win for you? I hope you're enjoying the book. Please leave me some comments about what you are thinking. Keep working on your list of things that you want to convey to those that you care about, or reach out to them. I love the idea of writing them a letter and even sharing some pictures of fond memories with the person as a gift. I think memories make the best gifts. So thanks for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you next Thursday, 2 o'clock. Be here. If not, you can always come back and see what we've posted and catch it if you. I was telling Kirk, my husband, that I decided at the last minute that I was going to read this book to you instead of just recommend it. And he said, "You're going to put him to sleep." I hope I'm not putting you to sleep. But if you want to listen to it right before you go to sleep, that's okay with me. I hope you have a wonderful day. I miss being in your presence right now, but I'm glad we can connect in this way. Till next time.